Hello and welcome to another jungle tutorial. My name is Virkayu, and in this champion guide we're going to be looking at how to jungle with Kayn. We're going with the Rhaast transformation. We're not going to talk about the Shadow Assassin or which one is better. Each one has their respective strengths and weaknesses. There are better assassins and there are better fighters, and he struggles versus meta junglers, but Kayn's unique kit is what makes him so fun to play and so powerful in the right hands. We're going to have a slightly different format in this one by looking at how his abilities transform when you become Rhaast, recommended runes and items, and then breaking down a huge combat game whereby using Rhaast's low cooldown CC and quick engage tools, we were able to mount an 18k gold swing for the comeback. Kayn is not the most potent early game threat, but certainly can snowball very well using his fast map movements and strong counter jungling and counter ganking kit. Usually Kayn is a master counter jungler and can punish enemies by stealing crucial early camps during their ganks, which is more punishing if those ganks aren't successful. Rhaast is most useful into a more tanky CC oriented team where you can use your kit to peel, engage, or disrupt. You do percentage max HP damage and can sustain very well against most targets. Even against team without any discernible tank threat, Rhaast can duel enemy carries and survive their damage due to his fighter nature. You also have that added CC threat, you survive much longer and can battle through enemy CC and have more build versatility than if you were the Shadow Assassin. Rhaast becomes more useful the higher you go in rank, as enemy teams can be more well coordinated on CCing and peeling versus an assassin, whereas if you decide to embrace the Darkin, you can survive much longer and have more of a meaningful role in the late game as you scale very well. Let's now begin with how Kayn's abilities are changed when you choose, or rather succumb, to Rhaast's ancient power. His passive gives you innate healing from damage dealt by your spells. It's important to note that this is post-mitigation damage, so after armor has reduced the damage you put out. Nevertheless, you can survive for a long time because of the build versatility, and this can allow your team to pick up targets to focus and win a team fight, even if you die, because the enemy will be focusing you, or at least trying to kill you, as you sustain for a longer time than you would if you were an assassin. The Q ability is where Rhaast receives his evolved damage. It reduces the AD scaling, which isn't even that much for the spell, and adds a percentage max HP damage bonus, which is capped against monsters, but it still is substantial for that time in the game when you do actually transform. It's worth noting that the damage on Kayn's Q is per individual proc, so if you hit enemies with your Q dash movement, as well as with the follow-up scythe swing, you do double the damage. This is crucial when conducting first clears and for general clearing in the jungle, as you want to ensure you're hitting Q both times on the camps. Using Q to move over walls, as well as in a fluid motion with your flash, is one of the requirements of using this ability well. You can also Q towards a wall before Eing out to safety. This Rhaast damage on the Q means that most will max it, and you will see clips in this tutorial where I max Q, max W. This is because I like to test and play around with different builds and setup to see what works best for my playstyle as well as the champion. Q does have an added 55 bonus damage to monsters in both instances, so versus heavy melee teams or very tanky teams, I do like to max Q, but in terms of raw efficient damage through one spell rotation, W will do more. W has a higher AD scaling, higher base damage, and with warrior completed will do more damage even with hitting both instances of the Q. And in most cases you are unlikely to hit both procs consistently, whereas W has a much higher range and burst potential. The difference comes in the cooldowns of the abilities, as hitting both procs and Q in 2 spell rotations with the max cooldown will do more in the same or less time than the W, given that it has a much higher cooldown. When you do eventually become Rhaast, realistically, even if you max W, you will have a couple points in Q already. Having that added CC up more often can turn tides in fights also. Ultimately, I will leave it to you guys to decide based upon your player style which one suits you more with how you like to play Kayn and Rhaast in that early game to mid game phase. Q does have that damage amplifier, but W has more burst in one spell as well as the added CC. Finally, note that the W has a slow before being upgraded into transformation and also is cast after a short delay, meaning you can have occurrences like this where Alistar knocks me away but my W actually does go through. Keep that in mind for later in the game. If you do get knocked out but your W does go through, it will give you the CC so you can get back into the fight with a Q or an E. Rhaast's W knockup is a defining skill attribute in terms of his ability to teamfight and skirmish. Peeling divingly sins, hard engaging onto the enemy, and shredding tanks with consistent W knockups and Q damage are all unique features to his playstyle over the Shadow Assassin. Moving on to his ultimate. As you see here in this Xayah example, a hard engage is done using E and then baiting out her ult with my ult. The ult with Rhaast is modified to remove hard AD scaling and instead do percentage max HP damage and as well heal on the target's max HP. Not to mention healing based on the damage dealt with this ult due to his passive. The way you use it, however, is not much changed other than knowing you will do some nice damage to tanks along with being able to hit Q multiple times both before and after. You can use it to finish off priority targets, get out of a sticky situation while the enemies focus you and collapse on you foolishly, or simply troll a malfight to boost team morale when your team are hard carrying and you're useless. The CC avoidance and ability to escape and survive are important factors in using Kayn's ult, especially as Rhaast, so be aware of your timings and don't forget to bait enemies into using their ults, flashes, and dashes while you are deep inside them, absorbing their very souls. Remember that the ult lasts for 2.5 seconds and that's an eternity for enemies who are trying to survive, so be sure to track and keep track of the enemy's spells and summoners when you do use this ability. It can lead to free kills, tower dives, and teamfight wins, but it can also lead you to being somewhere you really don't want to be, so do use it with caution. Now that we've covered Rhaast's evolution of Kayn's abilities, let us briefly look at his E, because this isn't changed in any way with your red transformation and is also maxed last. We will see examples of how to use this when we analyze the gameplay later in the video, but just remember to use this for hard flanking engages with devastating knockups, as well as escaping after an engage after a crucial target is killed, or finally, if you need to survive a lost team fight. Be aware that you can use spells while being inside of walls and using your E ability so you can get some poke down, as well as being able to escape the situation. You see here in this example of how to use E, especially early game, to collapse on an enemy and punish their bad positioning or greedy invades. This is also useful for creating fast farming lanes and counter jungling advantages. Get in, steal the camps, get out. Moving on now to talk about runes and recommended items. Electrocute is by far the best option on Kayn, blue or red, and can allow you to get game swinging early kills, which is what you really want. Along with maxing W should you prefer, it will allow you to serve up an enemy Udyr, as in this example. Electrocute as a strong early game option allows you to remove enemies from the map to open up counter jungling lanes and improve the speed with which you reach your item leads over the enemy jungler. So even if your transformation is delayed for whatever reason, you can still do well in duels and skirmishes. Zombie Ward is very useful when you're an active map manipulator like Kayn, although you can go eyeball collection should you want the scaling, and the extra movement speed only improves your rotations when you take Relentless Hunter. However, Ravenous Hunter works nicely with Kayn's healing damage as Rhaast, and so is an equally viable option. The Precision Tree has two preferred options. I like the added damage on low HP targets to synergize with his ult, along with Triumph to gain HP upon a takedown, which can be life-saving. As you see in the Shen example here, I survived the tower shot and the minion damage. This also has the added benefit of giving Kayn additional HP in teamfights when a takedown is secured, and if you're Rhaast, this is excellent to have along with your natural healing. As a secondary note, you can go with Celerity and Water Walking as your secondary options, although I think that works way better with Shadow Assassin. I do recommend Precision Tree overall as a better well-rounded option. Moving on to ideal items, it's important to note the difference when building Rhaast versus the Shadow Assassin. While your raw AD scaling percentage on abilities remains when you're using Blue Kayn, as you saw from earlier, those ratios are reduced and replaced with percentage max HP and lesser scaling AD ratios, meaning building raw lethality and AD on Rhaast can work, but it isn't really optimal with how his kit is changed. Your core items are Warrior and Black Cleaver because you will most likely be doing a lot more auto attacking, you want the health, and the cooldown is really useful for your knockup CC. You don't do as much raw spell damage and burst damage, it's more sustained damage over time. Now, in some of these examples you will see I rush Moby Boots early game regardless of the form, and that's because I value map movement and making an impact where I can. However, it is most optimal and efficient to purchase resistant boots, Milk Treads vs high CC magic damage teams, and Tabbies vs the Vaynes, Yasuas, and Twitches of the world. After these core items, there are options available to you. We have the full tank special prioritizing Spirit Visage for the healing passive and Deadman's for armor, or perhaps Randuin's should you be against a high crit team. However, a typical build, especially our head, is having that GA and Spirit Visage core. For the final slot, you can add whatever armor or magic item you deem necessary versus the enemy composition. And you can purchase Death's Dance along with GA for the maximum damage and healing. Most of the time I do recommend going a bit tankier, and if you want to be pure damage, Blue Kayn is just better. Rhaast's strengths come from being able to survive, disrupt, and peel for your team, which is no good if you're diving the backline and dying as the enemy can peel or kite you because you don't have enough burst damage. Let's now look at how this example game with Rhaast ended up in such a horrible situation. We may have been down 8,000 gold, with 2 inhibitors dead and the enemy in possession of Baron, but that gold lead was mitigated in appearance by the fact I had 10 kills and a nice gold lead on the enemy Lee Sin, which means my team is effectively further behind than 8,000 gold. Through counter ganking, opportunistic picks, collapsing to try save my team, I managed to have a strong individual game, but the rest of my team was struggling. Fortunately, we were a scaling composition, and I needed to be Rhaast in order to have some successful late game team fights because my team just didn't have any other tanky or fighter threat. These little plays that are possible because of our team comp, including saving an inhibitor at 23 minutes, were crucial in our ability to come back. The first play that I want to focus on is made possible by us saving the third inhibitor from me taken and us having a combo kill in the Lee Sin, which forces the enemy team to back off while we can casually wave clear and gather vital gold and XP from the 2 waves of super minions heading into our base. This is done simply by me hitting a W on the Lee Sin and Yasuo ulting him. It's very simple, but if we didn't have that CC, it might not have happened. The next play is me using Rhaast to peel a Lee Sin engage by Wing him as he comes in for a flash kick. This also hits the Braum knockup, and the enemy is slightly separated, so I use this opportunity to auto-attack and ult the enemy teamer who is quite fed, and this causes that patented suction effect, whereby I'm in the middle of a 3v1 and my team is involved in a 4v2 against the Braum and Lee Sin. Naturally, this is very good for us, and the enemy's peel engage will be low or dead by the time they've killed me. I'm keeping their carries busy instead of having them destroy my team who are still behind. Though I don't get any kills here, my survivability and disruption as Rhaast baited the enemy into a botched engage and a segregated teamfight. After my team managed to survive that fight with all of our inhibs up, there are 2 more sequences that give us a comeback win. The first is an extended fight whereby I use Rhaast to position myself between the enemy and my team. I'm simply moving in and out to attempt to get cooldowns while my GP and Draven can do as much damage as possible. Being the only fighter tanky player on our team, my positioning is very important. Eventually the team gets separated again and a nice engage by Yasuo nets us 2 kills as well as Braum's flash. We do overstay though trying to get this tower, and we get caught up by Braum returning to the fight. I managed to ult the Ezreal, and them only having Braum to peel means that as Ezreal tries to move back towards his mid laner and the safety of his tower, it once again splits up their team. I W Braum as I come out of the ult and Q to finish him off. I use my E on the wall to zone them away with the threat of CC, and we secure the tower. A few minutes later, terrible positioning from Lee Sin and Teemo gets himself killed, and of course this has nothing to do with me being Rhaast, but we have to play around the cards we're dealt and make decisions based upon the game at hand. Don't question, just accept and play around it. Despite the fact we're able to get Baron and Elder Drake, we're still being cautious. We don't want to throw the lead we've managed to accumulate ourselves. Now GP is in our base, but a simple mistake of Lucian poking his head around a bush means that Rhaast can go from 0 to 100 very quickly and can end the game with his CC engage. Their team is only mildly split up, but that's all I need. I flash W to guarantee the knockup and immediately ult Lucian. He panic dashes and flashes out, but it's too late. I knew he would do that, so it's important that once you hit the W, once you hit their damage, you ult immediately, especially on a shifty and priority target. I've replaced Warrior with Death Stance, and the enemy again gives me that suction effect while Lee Sin and Braum are left on the other side of the wall while I have 3 carries on me. I'm disrupting and irritating. I'm also able to solo kill the Lucian with ease, and my team helps me clean up the rest of the fight as GP arrives at the end. Rhaast thrives at split-second decision making, and any E or flash engages along with your Q and ult usage can spell victory for your team because of how lightning quick Rhaast can be through the map. From this engage and teamfight victory, we're finally able to end the game and complete our comeback. See in this short quick example from another game where Gangplank hits some heavy poke onto the enemy. I don't need more of a window than that. I E, flash, W, and we win the teamfight easily. And by the way, this game was also a huge comeback and was decided by this split-second engage decision. Okay, I hope this was in-depth enough for you to understand the ins and outs of playing Rhaast and hopefully give you some tips on how to maximize your games with him. He truly is a fun champion and extremely satisfying to playing his smooth playstyle. Kayn offers important scaling, tankiness, peel engage when you go with this transformation, and if you can learn how to have an efficient early game and play around the enemy's mistakes and meta champions, I can really recommend going the Rhaast transformation to carry yourself to a few wins. Thank you for watching. Please like and comment on this video if you enjoyed it. It took a lot of time to make and would really help the channel. Please subscribe and share for more jungle videos, and as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.